Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at probability now. And so you can see the objectives for this. We're going to go through many of the kind of calculations we have in probability, but I always want you to keep in mind kind of these informal definitions, the formal definitions, how that connects to our use of probability in statistics, right? And start to put those together. Remember, one of the goals of this course is to help you evaluate decision making, right? Start to consider how you can make informed decisions based on statistics, and statistics is connected to probability, right? What is the likelihood that we would be observing something, right? Especially as we collect some data. So first I want to acknowledge that there's a word we use in the world called random, that many of us use it, but it's not necessarily statistically correct in the sense of an event is truly random if each outcome has an equal chance of occurring. And so many times in our world we'll say, oh, I randomly ran into somebody at the store, right? But if you live next to them, right, it's not really a random occurrence. There was some probably likelihood that at some point you would. It wasn't necessarily random, but we use that word random in the world many times. So I want you to start to think about the word, how you use it in the world, and then how we're going to use it in probability, like when we connect it to simple random sampling or random sampling methods, right? That idea that, again, everyone or everything has, each outcome has an equal chance of occurring. So moving forward, we look at kind of the informal definition, which we talked about in the introduction. The chances or likelihood that an event will occur, right? And that's kind of our informal definition, what we carry around with us. A little bit more formal, right? Probability is the predicted long-run relative frequency of an event, right? So we describe probability many times in the world as a percent chance, right? But we start with its relative frequency. It's a value between 0 and 1, okay, which we'll see here. You can see in the bottom here, 0 to 1. And so again, so this long run relative frequency is if we do something, right? Meaning if we do something many times over, the probability of an event is the proportion of times we see or saw that event occur or actually occur, right? And so if you do something over and over and over again, and we can kind of then look at the proportion of times we saw this event occur, right, that actually occurred, that is the idea of our probability, or this long-run relative frequency. Now, we have some notation for our probability. Instead of writing that out, we have some language and notation we use. And so we use this capital P parentheses X, X representing some event, the probability to win a lottery, right, or the probability that you win. We would write it in that notation like that, capital P. Now, properties of probability, like I said, we know it's a value between 0 and 1 relative frequency. We do convert that into percents. We say 50% chance, 100%, 20% chance, right? We use words as we described: impossible, it will never happen, right? Unlikely, likely, rare, right? There's a lot of words we use. It's certain, always, it will happen, right? So many words we use to describe probability. Now, important in our work in statistics becomes us observing unlikely or unusual events, right? And so for our purposes now, we'll say a probability such as 5% or less, we will deem or call unusual or unlikely, right? These are often values that are extremely high or low from what we would typically expect. And so we want to keep that one in mind too. A lot of, again, subtle ideas and terms we've used in the world, how we then define them a little bit differently in statistics, right? And here are some other definitions: outcomes, events, sample space, right? Because we're going to be evaluating the probability of these things occurring. So you can see outcomes and events. An event and outcome get often confused because an event is an outcome or a collection of outcomes, right? An event, and again, that's a word we use in the world, an event. I'm going to go to an event or something occurs, right? And so you have to start to think about how this lands with you in terms of statistically, right, our definitions versus how you use these in the world. And so again, the outcome, one possible way something can happen, And then a sample space is the set of all possible outcomes. Okay, so again, words that we're going to play with here as we move ahead. Calculating probabilities here, you can see if every possible outcome has an equal chance of occurring, we can just use counting to calculate, right? So we can count the number of outcomes of an event divided by the total number of possible outcomes. And so you'll see this fraction, right? We write probability many times, again, as a fraction or relative frequency, because that's kind of our formal definition, right? That's long-term relative frequency. And so let's keep that in mind, and we'll continue on some examples next.